Detective Explainer here. Today, I'm going to explain a crime thriller film called Phone Booth. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. It is estimated that 8 million people live in New York. With technology rapidly developing, phone booths are quickly dying and are easily being replaced with cell phones. For New York City publicist Stuart Shepard, a brand new day is just another ordinary day of attending meetings and making endless phone calls to his clients. One day, Stu uses a phone booth at 53rd and 8th, and while he's making his call, he removes his wedding ring. Just then, a pizza delivery guy shows up, and Stu rudely tells him to go away, saying that there must be some mistake. However, the man insists that he got the right person and that the pizza is already paid for. Annoyed, Stu cusses at him before giving him $5, telling the delivery guy to eat the pizza himself. The delivery guy is left humiliated, but he's forced to take the money and leave. Stu is finally able to call Pam, an aspiring actress who also plays the role of the girl he's seeing behind his wife's back. Pam asks him why he's always in the same phone booth at the same time every day before asking how his day is. Stu tells her that his day is getting better, then informs her that he's brought up her name to some publicists for the part of Mel Gibson's leading lady, along with other actresses. After that, Stu invites Pam to meet him for a couple of martinis at the City Hotel, saying he'd like to introduce her to some people and talk about her career. Though she's reluctant to refuse, Pam tells Stu that she can't due to a prior commitment. Disappointed, Stu tells her that he's rescheduled one of his meetings just to see her, and when she asks him if he's mad, Stu says that he isn't. Pam appeases him by asking to meet the following day, and he agrees before ending the call. Stu is about to wear his wedding ring again when the payphone suddenly rings. Stu answers it, and the man on the other end of the line tells Stu that he'd hurt his feelings when Stu didn't accept the pizza. Stu asks him who he is, but the man only tells him not to even think about leaving that phone booth. According to the man, the pizza's purpose was to keep Stu's strength up for what's coming next. Thinking that it's just a prank call, Stu tries hanging up, but the man warns him not to, ominously mentioning that Stu will learn to obey him. For the second time, Stu asks him who he is, and the man replies that he's someone who enjoys watching Stu. Suddenly feeling conscious, he looks around, trying to find where the caller is. The man then starts describing what Stu is wearing, so Stu asks him where he is. The caller tells him to check out the windows, so he does. Not entirely convinced that the caller is watching him, Stu asks the man what he's doing, and when the caller gets it right, he lifts his hand in the air and raises his middle finger, offending the man. The caller tells him that that's not nice, then calls him Stu. Trying not to show his surprise, Stu tells the caller that he doesn't know any Stu. When the man asks him if he prefers to be called Stuart, Stu replies that many people in that neighborhood know him. The caller then recites Stu's full name and address, so Stu tells him to get lost. Unfazed, the caller casually tells him that he knows Pamela McFadden. He starts threatening Stu, telling him that it's not in his best interest to disconnect the call and that someone could get hurt. Believing that the caller might just be some failed actor that he wouldn't handle, Stu tries intimidating the caller, saying he will hunt him down and crush him. He asks the man if his assistant, Adam, has asked him to prank call Stu, and the man replies that it's all his idea. For the last time, Stu tells the man that he's hanging up, and the caller tells him that he'll say hi to Stu's wife, Kelly, for him, before ending the call. Using the phone's callback feature, Stu tries calling the man again but fails. He then steps outside the phone booth, carefully watching his surroundings. After minutes of standing there, the payphone rings once more. Stu answers it, asking the caller what he wants, and the caller says that he wants Stu's full attention. Stu asks the caller if he's an actor, and the caller sarcastically replies that he is, adding that he's one of Stu's pathetically failed ones. Stu tries to offer him help by getting him auditions, but the caller questions his ability to get him auditions since he's a publicist and not an agent. Stu promises that he can call some of his contacts, and that's when the caller orders Stu to call the person he contacted from when he first got into the phone booth. Stu pretends that he doesn't know what he's talking about, but the man says he already wrote the number down, adding that he can see every number Stu has pressed. Since he refuses to call Pam, the man calls her for him instead, leaving Stu baffled while the phone rings. When Pam answers the phone, the caller puts her on speaker so Stu can hear her. The caller introduces himself to Pam as one of Stu's friends, then tells her that Stu lies. When Pam tries talking to Stu, asking if what the man said is true, he fruitlessly tells her to hang up the phone, but the caller informs Stu that Pam can't hear him. Going back to Pam, the caller tells her that Stu hasn't been completely honest with her. The caller asks her why a man with a cell phone would call every day from a phone booth, and Pam answers that Stu says that it's quieter that way. He calls that a stupid reason, and he nonchalantly reveals that Stu calls her from a phone booth every time because his wife checks his cell phone bills. That means that calling from a phone booth wouldn't leave any trace of their conversation. Pam stammers, insisting that Stu told her he isn't married, but the caller states that Stu is married to a woman named Kelly. To further humiliate him, the caller tells Pam that the only reason Stu is inviting him to the city hotel is that he wants to sleep with her, adding that it's got cheap rooms for cheap girls. Pam tries to defend herself, saying that she wasn't planning on sleeping with him and that since he has promised to help her, she's keeping in touch with him. Before ending the call, the caller tells Pam that Stu has never even made anyone a star. At the phone booth, a hooker impatiently tells Stu to hang up the phone. Without even flinching, he tells her to go away, and the woman curses him before leaving. Stu tries to ask the man why he's doing all this, but the caller cuts him off, saying that they should call Kelly. Stu immediately says that his wife is not home, but the caller replies that he's sure she's at the shop in Columbus. When Stu tries to ask the caller how he knows all that information about him and Kelly, the man ignores him, instructing him to speed dial his wife and press auto 1, which is Kelly's button. Stu then asks what he should tell Kelly, and the man says he should come clean and admit that he's cheating. Stu gets defensive, claiming he's not cheating on his wife and that he never has. Stu then compares his relationship with Kelly and Pam to having a beautiful home. He says even though a guy has a home, he still dreams of having a quick vacation, staying in a nice hotel room with a great view. The caller laughs and mocks Stu, saying that Kelly is a home while Pam is a motel. Stu swears at him, and the caller tells him that the language is uncalled for. Meanwhile, the hooker comes back and angrily tells Stu to let her use the phone, and they get into an argument again. Stu yells that she can use other phones in New York or maybe a phone in a restaurant, which only angers the woman. She then threatens Stu that she'll be back before finally storming off. Listening to the entire thing, the caller laughs again at Stu. He begs the caller not to call his wife, and in exchange, they'll do some headshots with a photographer. The caller only chuckles before asking if he really believes that he's an actor. Before Stu could answer, the caller tells him that he's not an actor and that he only wants Stu to come clean to his wife. With no other choice, Stu calls his wife using his cell phone. When Kelly answers, the caller instructs Stu to hold the phone close to the receiver so he can hear it. Stu does as he's told, and then his wife asks him where he is before telling him that some guy has called her, saying that Stu would be calling her from a phone booth to tell her something important. Stu explains that there are many prank calls going around, while on the other line, the caller wants Stu to tell Kelly that he's been inviting girls to have drinks with him at discreet hotels. While talking to Kelly and the caller, the woman from before comes back with one of her companions, and the two women harass Stu into leaving the phone booth. Hearing the commotion from the other line, Kelly asks Stu what's going on, and her husband tells her that it's just some hookers who want to use the phone, aggravating the women. The ladies then start making a scene, banging on the phone booth. In the middle of all that, the caller wants Stu to tell Kelly that he wants to sleep with other women. Instead of following his orders, Stu informs his wife that there's a guy saying things about him, things that might not be true. As the women continue to harass him, Stu warns them that he'll call the cops. He then tells Kelly not to believe whatever the man tells her. Scared, Kelly asks Stu to come down to her store so they can talk, and Stu tells her that he'll try. After talking to his wife, Stu opens the phone booth and threatens the two women that he'll have them deported to Jersey. The women exchange a few more nasty words with Stu before finally leaving, and Stu resumes talking to his caller. As they continue their conversation, the caller accuses Stu of not telling his wife the truth. Stu then asks the caller why he wants to mess with Kelly's life when she has done him no harm. To which the caller says everybody does harm. Disgusted, Stu tells the caller that their conversation is over, but the man warns Stu that if he hangs up, the man will kill him. Doubtful that the man will actually kill him, Stu taunts the caller, asking him how he will kill him with only his binoculars. The caller replies that he never said he has binoculars and that he actually has a highly magnified telescopic image of Stu. The caller then reveals that he has a rifle, .30 caliber bolt-action 700 with a carbon-1 modification and a state-of-the-art Henschel tactical scope. Meanwhile, a small toy robot moves and stays in front of the phone booth. When Stu tells the caller that he doesn't believe him, the man pulls the gun's cocking handle, startling him. Nervous, Stu says that cops will immediately swarm that place if he tries firing a weapon. To test if what Stu just said is true, the caller starts counting, and Stu quickly ducks even before the man reaches number 3. The man tells Stu that ducking won't help him before firing, hitting the toy robot. The caller taunts Stu once more, saying that nobody even noticed that he just fired a gun. True enough, when Stu looks around, everyone's just minding their business as if nothing happened. Laughing, the man tells Stu to stand up and be a man. Outside the phone booth, the vendor notices his broken robot and starts talking to Stu. The caller asks if he wants him to take care of the vendor, but Stu tells him no, then gives the vendor some money so he'll go away. Then, another hooker shows up at the phone booth, but Stu just ignores her. The caller continues to talk, asking Stu to try to figure out where he is. The man says Stu's doing a lot better than the others, meaning that he's done it before. He describes how he shot a child-fixated man 10 days ago, and a corporate executive who had cashed in all of his stocks just before the bottom fell out, while others lost everything. After that, the caller asks Stu where he's aiming. And when he sees the little red dot on his body, just below his right shoulder, Stu answers his question. Then, the man inquires whether Stu knows anything about those killings, but Stu says he doesn't. The man gives him a hint, saying that all their belongings were left in their bodies, and that's when Stu realizes that those killings weren't robberies, they were executions. As they continue talking, the hookers show up yet again, only this time, they have a guy with them. The guy, Leon, orders Stu to hang up and get out, but the caller tells Stu not to do it. Leon and the hookers keep harassing Stu to end his call, but he tries to reason with them and say that he can't just hang up. He even gives Leon $120 just to leave him alone, but Leon wouldn't budge. Furious now, Leon punches the phone booth and makes a crack in the glass as the hookers cheer him on. Chuckling, the caller offers to help him, but Stu refuses, saying he can handle it. Leon then crosses the street to get a bat, and when he comes back, he smashes the phone booth's glass. Now completely exposed, Leon grabs Stu and puts him in a chokehold as he tries to drag him out of the phone booth. The caller asks Stu once more if he needs help, and this time he says yes. Without warning, Leon gets shot, stumbling before hitting the ground. The hookers blame Stu for what happened, accusing him of shooting their friend. Thanks to the commotion, the people gather around them, while some are even calling the cops. One of the hookers asks Stu why he shot Leon, and he tells her that it's not him, then asks her if she sees a gun on him. The other hooker starts making up stories now, saying she sees Stu with a gun. Shaken, Stu tells the caller that he did what he could to drive Leon away, but the man still wouldn't leave him alone. The caller then tells him that Leon wouldn't have died if only Stu dealt with him with respect. He also tells Stu to man up and to take responsibility for what he's done. Tired of listening to the caller, Stu secretly calls 911. Since he cannot speak directly to the operator for fear of alerting the caller, Stu tries to keep him talking, giving the operator hints that he needs help. Unfortunately, the operator doesn't understand and hangs up. As soon as the 911 call ends, the caller shoots the side of the phone booth, grazing Stu's ear. The caller tells him that he heard the 911 call, and that's when Stu realizes that the caller has bugged the booth, which is also how he knows about Pam. The cops start showing up, and they order Stu to hang up the phone. When Stu tells them that he's on an important call, their captain, Ed Ramey, asks for his full cooperation. Captain Ramey tries negotiating with Stu, and the caller tells Stu that the captain is getting on his nerves. Captain Ramey continues talking to him, trying to see if there's any way he can make him surrender. To make things more interesting, the caller orders Stu to insult the captain by asking him if he still pleasures himself after his wife left him. Stu refuses, but the caller threatens to shoot the captain, forcing him to do as he's told. Without answering his question, the captain leaves, but not before asking one of the cops to call a techie who they can talk to about the payphone. As the reporters start arriving, the caller insults Stu by saying he's just a small-time with a credibility problem. From afar, Captain Ramey instructs his men to trace the location of the person Stu is talking to. He also orders sharpshooters to be placed at different buildings in the area. Meanwhile, Stu's phone starts ringing, and when the caller asks him to answer it, he says he can't because the cops might think he's reaching for a gun. Before Stu can answer the phone, Kelly arrives at the scene, making Stu realize that it's not Kelly calling him, but the man he's talking to. Kelly then talks to Captain Ramey, telling him about the man who called her earlier at her shop, but the captain thinks it might be just another case of a jealous husband. Before she can go into the details of the call, Captain Ramey is called by one of his men, informing him that the sharpshooters are now in position. With the help of Kelly, Captain Ramey talks to Stu, but he denies knowing her, claiming she's not his wife. When the caller threatens to shoot Kelly, Stu asks him what he wants, and the caller orders him to tell the truth about Pam, promising to let him go if he does. Almost crying now, Stu calls out to Kelly, and she immediately runs toward the phone booth, with the cops making sure they maintain their distance. After hearing his confession, Kelly says she doesn't care about what Stu has done, and the caller tells Stu that he's not letting him go. Stu hangs up the phone, but it starts ringing again. At this point, Stu finally declares that he's giving himself up. He steps out of the phone booth, but when Captain Ramey demands his gun, he says he doesn't have one. The phone rings again, and as Kelly gets impatient, she tries to get near Stu, making the caller point the gun at her. Stu sees the red laser dot on Kelly's forehead, and when the captain sees it, too, he immediately orders everyone to stand down. Stu helplessly tells Captain Remy that he needs to answer the phone, and after some begging, the captain eventually lets him. After realizing what they're dealing with, Captain Remy tells one of his men that there's a sniper in one of the buildings and instructs him to let the others know and find him. Meanwhile, the caller informs Stu that he's planning on pinning Leon's murder on him, revealing that he stashed a gun on the phone booth ceiling. With a murder weapon inside the booth, everyone will now believe that he shot Leon. The caller then teases Stu to look to a window with pink curtains, hinting that he's there, and asks him to use the gun to shoot him. Stu tries reasoning that the cops will shoot him even before he reaches the gun, and the caller only laughs. He tells Stu that he's right and that he's not even in that window. Pam then arrives, and the killer threatens to shoot her or Kelly if Stu doesn't take out the gun from the ceiling. Pretending to bend down to look for his ring, Stu secretly calls Kelly to let her know what's happening, and Kelly then passes the phone to Captain Ramey. With Stu out of sight, the caller has no idea that Captain Ramey is listening to their conversation. Captain Ramey asked Kelly about the phone call she mentioned earlier, and she tells him that a man contacted her, telling her that Stu would be calling her from a phone booth. The captain then orders Kelly to stay in the car, then tells his men what to do while ensuring that they won't alert the caller. Captain Ramey talks to Stu once more, hinting that he knows there's a sniper in one of the buildings and that his men are ready to spring into action once they find him. He also hints that Stu can trust him, that it's safe to step out of the booth. Meanwhile, the caller tells Stu to confess to everyone about how he's been lying about himself the whole time, making himself look important when he actually isn't. Again, Stu does as he's told, even calling himself a fake. As Stu sobs and continues to confess to everyone, including Kelly and Pam, the cops manage to trace Kelly's call earlier to Barclay Hotel. Now that he knows what room the caller is calling from, the captain hints to Stu that they have found the caller, and Stu informs the caller that the cops are coming his way. The cops mobilize, and when the caller threatens once more to shoot Kelly, Stu takes out the gun from the ceiling, steps out of the booth, and demands the caller to shoot him instead. In a matter of seconds, Stu is shot and everything goes into chaos. From the Barclay Hotel, the cops burst through the room where the caller is, only to find his dead body. Still lying on the floor, Stu is informed by the captain that he was only hit by a rubber bullet and that they have already apprehended the caller. Stu and Kelly reunite, and when the cops bring him the caller's dead body on a stretcher, Stu identifies him as the pizza delivery guy. While Stu's heavily medicated inside the ambulance, a man shows up and reveals himself to be the real caller and sniper. He warns Stu to get himself together, or he'll hear from him again. The caller leaves, and later, another payphone rings with another man answering it. Don't forget to subscribe our channel and leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.